There are only 3 rules. If you hear 1 knock, don't move. If you hear 2 knocks, don't answer the voice. If you hear 3 knocks, whatever happens, don't open the door. I laughed when my grandfather told me those rules. 3 nights later, I was begging God for a 4th one, because by then, it wasn't trying to get into my house. It was trying to become someone I would willingly let inside. People always ask me why I burned down the farmhouse. The police called it an electrical fire. The newspapers said it was an accident. They were wrong. I burned it because something inside that house had been knocking on the same front door for longer than anyone could remember, and I was the first idiot who almost answered. It started 3 days after my grandfather's funeral. He'd lived alone in that farmhouse for nearly 40 years. No wife, no visitors, no pets, just him, and a house at the end of a forgotten dirt road. When he died, everyone in town seemed strangely relieved. At the funeral, people cried, but they also avoided looking toward the old farmhouse. It wasn't grief, it was fear. As everyone was leaving, an elderly woman I'd never met grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were freezing cold. She looked me straight in the eyes and asked, "Did your grandfather ever tell you about the knocks?" I frowned. "The what?" She immediately let go of my hand. Her face turned pale. "So, he never chose someone." Before I could ask what she meant, she walked away. I stood there watching her disappear into the crowd. It was one of the strangest conversations I'd ever had. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I should have. A week later, I moved into the farmhouse to prepare it for sale. The house hadn't changed since I was a kid. Same cracked wooden porch. Same rusted mailbox. Same rocking chair sitting exactly where my grandfather always left it. Even his old coffee mug was still on the kitchen table. It felt as if he'd simply stepped outside and forgotten to come back. The first 2 nights were uneventful. I cleaned the bedrooms, sorted old photographs, packed dusty boxes into the garage. Nothing unusual happened. The silence actually felt peaceful. On the 3rd night, rain rolled across the valley. By 11 o'clock, the electricity had gone out. I lit a few candles and sat in the living room reading one of my grandfather's old books. Around midnight, I started hearing the wind push against the trees outside. Branches scraped across the roof. The windows rattled softly. Normal sounds, comforting sounds. Then, everything stopped. The rain, the wind, even the crickets. The silence came so suddenly that I looked up from the book without even realizing it. That's when I noticed something. The old grandfather clock in the hallway had stopped ticking. 12:13 a.m. Exactly. It wasn't broken. I'd heard it ticking all evening. Now, nothing. The air inside the house felt different. Heavy. Almost difficult to breathe. I reached for my phone. No signal. Not one bar. That wasn't unusual out here. What was unusual was that the battery had dropped from 78% to 1%. Right in front of my eyes. The screen went black. At that exact moment, knock. One slow knock echoed through the house. Not loud, not violent, just patient. I froze. The sound had come from the front door. I waited. Maybe someone needed help. Maybe a driver had gotten lost. The storm had been bad enough. I started to stand. Then I remembered something. Not a story. Not a ghost tale. A memory. I was 8 years old. I had run toward the front door after hearing someone knock late at night. Before I could reach it, my grandfather grabbed me so hard that I fell backwards. It was the only time in my life I'd ever seen fear in his eyes. He locked the deadbolt, closed every curtain, then knelt beside me and whispered, "If you ever hear one knock after midnight, stay exactly where you are." I had asked him why. He didn't answer. Instead, he blew out every light in the house, and we sat in complete darkness for almost an hour. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. The next morning, when I asked him again, he smiled and said he'd been joking. But he wasn't joking that night. Standing in that same living room years later, I realized I'd never forgotten the look on his face. Another minute passed. No second knock. No voice. Nothing. I slowly convinced myself I'd imagined it. Old houses make strange noises. Wood expands. Doors settle. There was always a reasonable explanation. I took one step toward the hallway. Then, knock. The second knock. This one was louder. Closer. And before the echo had even faded, a woman's voice came through the front door. Soft, warm, gentle. Exactly the way I remembered it. Sweetheart, can you help me? I felt my stomach twist, because I hadn't heard that voice in 11 years. It was my mother. And the thing that terrified me the most wasn't hearing her voice. It was realizing it hadn't used it until after the second knock. I couldn't move, not because I was brave, because every instinct in my body was screaming the same thing. Don't answer the voice. My mother's voice came again, softer this time, almost trembling. Please. I've been outside for so long. I'm cold. Just open the door. My throat tightened. For one impossible second, I wanted to believe it. Grief does strange things to people. Makes you hope, even when hope makes no sense. I took a slow step toward the front door. Then another. The old wooden floor creaked beneath my feet. The voice immediately stopped. That bothered me. It wasn't pleading anymore. It was waiting, as if it knew I was getting closer. I stopped a few feet from the door. My hand hovered in the air. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was no shadow beneath the door. The porch light was still on. I could see its glow spilling through the tiny gap under the frame. If someone had really been standing outside, their feet should have blocked the light. But the light stretched from one side of the door to the other, unbroken. There was no one there. Yet, my mother's voice whispered again. You've gotten taller. I almost didn't recognize you. I stumbled backward. Whatever was speaking, it wasn't outside. Or if it was, it didn't have a body. The silence returned. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Nothing. No voice. No movement. Finally, I backed away from the door and locked the second deadbolt. It probably wouldn't help, but doing nothing felt worse. I pulled every curtain shut, checked every window, locked the back door. Then I remembered something I'd completely forgotten. The old battery-powered radio. My grandfather kept it in the kitchen drawer for storms. I dug through the drawer until I found it. It crackled to life. Only static. I turned the dial. Static. Another station. Static. Then, a man's voice broke through. Repeat. If you hear knocking after midnight. The signal cut out. I froze. I slowly turned the dial back. Nothing. Just static again. Had I imagined it? I kept searching. After nearly a minute, the same voice returned. Weak. Distorted. Do not respond. Do not repeat the voice. Stay away from the door. The broadcast vanished again. I stared at the radio. It wasn't coming from a normal station. It sounded old, like a damaged recording. Before I could think about it, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they went out completely. Only the candles remained. Their flames suddenly leaned toward the front door. Every single one of them. As if a strong wind were blowing from outside. But the windows were closed. The room was still. Then, knock. The third knock. Louder than the first two. It echoed through every room in the farmhouse. The candles went out. Every one of them. Darkness swallowed the house. I stood perfectly still, holding my breath. The rule repeated itself inside my head. Don't open the door. Then something happened that my grandfather had never warned me about. The doorknob didn't turn. The door didn't shake. Instead, I heard footsteps, not outside, inside the house, slow, measured, coming from the hallway behind me. I spun around. Nothing. My eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness. The footsteps stopped, only a few feet away. I raised my flashlight and switched it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing an empty hallway. No one. Nothing. I exhaled. Maybe fear was making me hear things. Then the flashlight beam drifted toward the old hallway mirror. I almost screamed. Someone was standing behind me. I turned instantly. The hallway was empty. I looked back at the mirror. The figure was still there, tall, motionless, its face hidden in darkness, watching me. My hands shook so badly the flashlight slipped from my fingers. It hit the floor. The light spun across the room. For a split second, the figure in the mirror smiled. Not at me, at the front door. Then, it slowly raised one hand and pointed upstairs. The flashlight stopped spinning. The mirror reflected only me. The figure was gone. Everything was silent again, except for one sound. A floorboard creaked above my head. Someone had just walked across the second floor, and there was only one room up there. My grandfather's bedroom. The room he had kept locked for almost 40 years. I stared at the ceiling. The footsteps above me had stopped, but whoever, or whatever, had walked into my grandfather's bedroom was still there. I knew I should leave, run, break a window if I had to, anything but stay. I grabbed the flashlight and hurried toward the back door. My fingers wrapped around the handle. Locked. I unlocked it, pulled. Nothing. It wouldn't move. I pulled harder. The old wood groaned, but the door refused to open. I looked down. The deadbolt was unlocked. There was nothing blocking it. Simply wouldn't open. A cold realization settled over me. The rule had never been, don't let it in. The rule was, don't let yourself become trapped. I rushed to the kitchen window. It wouldn't budge. Neither would the living room windows. Every exit in the house had sealed shut. Then, a sound echoed from upstairs. Not footsteps. A chair, dragging slowly across the wooden floor. Screech. Silence. Screech. Again. The sound stopped directly above me. Then came 3 slow taps. Not on a door. On the floor. Tap. 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 Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Something was directly above me. I slowly raised the flashlight. The beam revealed nothing but old wooden boards. Then, a tiny crack appeared in the ceiling. Another, and another. Fine black dust trickled through them. It landed on my hand. It wasn't dust. It was ash. Fresh ash. As if something upstairs had burned. Long ago. My grandfather had never smoked. There had never been a fire. So where was the ash coming from? Before I could think about it, something fell through the crack. It landed at my feet with a soft thud. An old brass key. I recognized it immediately. The key to my grandfather's bedroom. I hadn't seen it in years. He used to wear it around his neck. Always, even while sleeping. Slowly, very slowly, the key slid across the floor, on its own, toward me, then stopped, as if waiting. My heart pounded. No, this was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. The thing upstairs wanted me to take the key. But why? The voice came again. Not from the front door. Not from outside. From upstairs. My mother's voice. Soft. Almost whispering. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I found Grandpa. He's waiting for you. My grip tightened around the flashlight. I didn't answer. The voice changed. It became my grandfather. Calm, gentle, exactly the way I remembered. You've done well. You followed the rules. Now come upstairs. There's one more thing I need to show you. For a split second, I almost believed him. Then I remembered something. My grandfather never called me upstairs. Not once. When I was little, that bedroom was forbidden. If he wanted to talk, he always came downstairs. That wasn't him. It knew his voice, but it didn't know his habits. I took one step backward. The house reacted instantly. Bang. Every door inside the farmhouse slammed shut at the same time. The sound shook the walls. Pictures crashed to the floor. The old grandfather clock, silent for hours, ticked once, ticked, then stopped again. The voice upstairs disappeared. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then, a new sound. Footsteps. Not above me anymore. Coming down the stairs. Slow, steady. One step, then another. I aimed the flashlight at the staircase. The beam trembled. A shadow stretched across the wall. Long. Unnaturally long. But no body appeared. Just the shadow. Kept moving. Step by step. As if someone invisible was walking down. When it reached the final step, it stopped. The shadow stood perfectly still. Then, it slowly lifted one arm and pointed toward the front door. At first, I didn't understand why. Then I heard it. 3 slow knocks. Again. Knock, knock, knock. My stomach dropped. That was impossible. I'd already heard all 3 knocks. The rule was over, wasn't it? Then I realized the terrifying truth. The knocks hadn't started over. They weren't for me. They were for whoever had just arrived outside. Headlights suddenly swept across the living room walls. A car had pulled into the driveway. A man's voice called from the porch. "Hello. This is Sheriff Collins. Your neighbor reported seeing lights go out. Is everything all right in there?" I froze. The shadow beside the staircase slowly turned its head toward me. Then it smiled. It wasn't smiling because help had arrived. It was smiling because someone else was about to answer a door. The sheriff knocked again. "Larry? It's Sheriff Collins. I'm coming in if you're all right." I opened my mouth, then stopped. My grandfather's rule echoed inside my head. Don't answer the voice. It didn't matter whose voice it was. I couldn't be certain anymore. The shadow beside the staircase hadn't moved. It simply stood there, watching, waiting. Then, Sheriff Collins laughed softly. "You still don't trust anybody, huh? I've got your grandfather's old shotgun in my truck. He told me to give it to you if anything ever happened." I frowned. That made no sense. My grandfather had sold his shotgun years ago. I knew because I'd helped him carry it into town. The thing outside had made its first mistake. It knew voices, it knew memories, but it didn't know the truth behind them. The shadow twitched, almost as if it had realized I'd noticed. Then, the sheriff's voice changed. It became more urgent. "Larry, your house is on fire." I instinctively looked toward the kitchen. Nothing. No smoke. No flames. When I looked back, the shadow was gone. My heart skipped. I swept the flashlight across the room. Empty. The hallway. Empty. The staircase. Empty. Then I heard breathing. Right behind me. Slow. Calm. I turned so fast that I nearly fell. No one. Only my own reflection in the hallway mirror. I took one step closer. My reflection didn't. It remained perfectly still. I froze. It smiled. I wasn't smiling. My reflection slowly lifted one finger, and pointed toward the front door. Then it mouthed 4 silent words. "It's still outside." Every muscle in my body locked. If the thing was in the mirror, then what was outside? Another knock. This time, only one knock. A minute passed. Then the second knock. The rule. It had started again. But not for me. For someone else. My eyes drifted toward the window. Sheriff Collins was no longer standing on the porch. His patrol truck was still there. The driver's door hung open. Its headlights lit the empty yard. But the sheriff himself had disappeared. I wanted to look away. Something forced me to keep staring. Then, a figure slowly stepped into the headlights. The sheriff. He wasn't walking. He was standing perfectly still, facing the house. Then, without moving his lips, his voice came from the front door. "Larry, please. I can hear it behind me. Open the door." I looked through the window. The sheriff's mouth never moved. He was at least 30 feet away. Yet his voice was somehow coming from the wood of the front door itself. The realization hit me like ice water. The voice never came from the person. It came from the door. The thing wasn't copying people. It was using the door like a mouth. Outside, the sheriff suddenly began screaming. Not words, just raw panic. He spun around as though something had grabbed him. His flashlight flew into the air. Then every light outside went black. Complete darkness. Silence. 10 long seconds passed. Then the porch light flickered back on. Sheriff Collins was standing exactly where he had been before. Calm. Smiling. His uniform was spotless. As if nothing had happened. He slowly bent down, picked up his flashlight, and looked directly at my window. Then he smiled wider than any human should be able to. Not because his mouth stretched too far, but because the smile never reached his eyes. He raised one hand, not to wave, to knock, against the air. 3 slow motions. Knock, knock, knock. No sound reached me, but at the exact same moment, the front door answered for him. 3 loud knocks exploded through the house. The walls shook. Every picture frame crashed to the floor. The mirror behind me shattered. Thousands of pieces scattered across the hallway. For one terrifying second, I saw the same smiling face reflected in every shard. Then, every reflection spoke together. Not loudly, almost gently. "You broke the first rule." I stared at the broken glass. My mind raced. No, I hadn't moved after the first knock. I hadn't answered the second. I hadn't opened the third. So what rule had I broken? One shard near my foot still reflected my face. Only, it wasn't looking at me. It was looking behind me. Its lips moved, very slowly. "You looked back." I didn't move. I didn't turn around. Not again. Every instinct told me to look behind me. Something was breathing over my shoulder. Slow, steady, close enough that I could feel warm air against the back of my neck. But I kept staring at the broken mirror. My reflection wasn't looking at me anymore. It was looking at whatever stood behind me. Then, very slowly, it lowered its eyes, as if even it was afraid. A whisper drifted into my ear. Not from the front door. Not from the mirror. From directly behind me. "You were never supposed to make it this far." I closed my eyes. If it wanted me to look, I wouldn't. The silence stretched on. 5 seconds. 10. Maybe longer. Then the whisper came again. Quieter this time. "You followed every rule. But you still don't understand." The front door creaked. Not opening. Just settling. Outside, the porch light flickered once. Then went dark forever. I heard slow footsteps crossing the porch. Not toward the house. Away from it. Across the gravel driveway. toward Sheriff Collins. I wanted to run to the window. I wanted to see what was happening. But I couldn't risk looking away from the mirror. A scream shattered the silence. It was the sheriff. A real scream, full of terror. Then, nothing. No footsteps. No struggle. Just silence. Minutes passed. Eventually, the pressure behind me disappeared. The breathing stopped. The air felt warm again. Carefully, I looked at the mirror. Only my reflection stared back. The shadow was gone. Morning arrived a few hours later. Sunlight poured through the windows. Birds were singing. The nightmare felt impossible. I unlocked the front door. For the first time since midnight, I stepped outside. Sheriff Collins' patrol truck was still parked in the driveway. The driver's door was open. His flashlight lay in the grass. But the sheriff was gone. Search teams spent weeks looking for him. They searched the woods, the river, every abandoned building for miles. They never found a single trace. Most people assumed he'd wandered into the forest during the storm. Only one person disagreed. The elderly woman from my grandfather's funeral. She came to see me the day after the search was called off. She didn't ask whether I was all right. She asked only one question. Did you open the door? I shook my head. No. For the first time. She smiled. Then she looked toward the farmhouse. It's finally looking for someone else. Before I could ask what she meant, she walked away. I sold the farmhouse 2 months later. I didn't tell the new owners about the knocks. Who would believe me? Besides, maybe it really was over. 3 years passed. I never heard another knock. Never saw another shadow. Never looked into an old mirror for too long. Little by little, life became normal again. Until last Tuesday. I was driving home from work when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something made me answer. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then I heard an old man quietly say, "You should have warned them." My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I knew that voice. My grandfather. The line went dead. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 12:13 a.m., someone knocked on my apartment door. What? I sat up in bed. I didn't move. A minute later, the second knock came. A woman's voice whispered through the door. "Sweetheart, I'm cold." I closed my eyes. Tears filled them before I even realized it, because I knew exactly what came next. I looked at the digital clock. 12:16 a.m. The hallway outside my apartment was silent. Completely silent. Then, just before the third knock, someone else's voice echoed from the apartment across the hall. A tired man shouted, all right, I'm coming." My heart stopped. I threw myself toward my front door. Not to open it, to stop him. But I was too late. I heard his lock click. His door slowly opened. Silence. No scream. No footsteps. Nothing. Then, from somewhere beyond the hallway, 3 slow knocks echoed again. This time, much farther away. As if whatever had been outside had already found its next home. And that was the moment I finally understood why my grandfather never tried to destroy it. You can't kill something that only exists because someone always answers. So if you ever wake up after midnight and hear 3 slow knocks at your door, don't ask who's there. Don't look through the peephole. And whatever you do, don't answer.